The four cases, upper, lower, subscript, caps of block, a block, looks, uber, uvia, caps of bloke, clocks, hap, per, shapers, hap, per, clocks of K, blower, four-door, per shapers is for your cocks off. And blooms, for depending persistent for your cock, think blocks, or deepening per inane, per yelling kids you plotting to wonder. About purchase Sunni, bits the sunny, tits sewn to wonder, subscript, sunny bits. Thankfully, you seemed better taxed to script itself, and to mitigate depthful attitude to talcum fascism, that is, tomorrow's yearnful, sordid attitude to talcum, then tamarack, yes, tamarack, altitude, cylindrical Parthenon. The four cases, upper, lower, subscript, caps, a block, looks, upper, uvia, caps, a bloke, clocks, hap, per shapers, hap, per clocks of K, a blower, four-door, per shapers is for your cocks off. Then blooms for depending persistent for your cock. Think block, sort of deepening, per inane, per yelling kids. You're blotting to wonder about purchase, Sunni, bits, the sunny, tits, sewn to wonder, subscript, sunny bits. Thankfully, you seemed better taxed to script itself than to mitigate depthful attitude to talcum fascism, that is, tomorrow's yearnful, sordid attitude to talcum, then to tamarack, yes, tamarack, altitude, cylindrical Parthenon. Tamarack Road, Tamarack Road, Tamarack Road, Tamarack. Pools, stations, hills, Benjamin, every house, New York State, wet sobriety. Leah Cole and Katinka Klein gave a performance in 2019 in a public pool on Chicago Avenue. I sat in the chlorinated bleachers and I watched these two cellists, professional, some of the most talented artists that I know, wearing bright red and bright yellow caps, Leah and Katinka respectively, and bright red and bright yellow gloves, Leah and Katinka respectively. And they threw cellos into the pool, and for lack of a better phrase, messed around with them for some time. They occasionally played the cellos in the manner that you're supposed to, but when they did that, they were also on a diving board. Waterlogged cellos don't quite have the resonant luster of the blow-dried version. Most of the time, when they played with the cellos as bodies in water. They moved them around the pool, which was a difficult task, 30 drowning cellos from one end to the other. But the cello has enough life in it to not start drowning on its own, which means that these bodies were maybe rafts or vests instead. One might call the space that the pool inhabited cavernous. Some people might call it wet, as in the sense of dry wet, reverb. You make a big splash on one side of the room and the sound lingers. What should be a brief articulated smack of wood hitting water becomes something closer to smack. A sonic object that lingers in the air for 10, 12, 14, 16, 20 seconds after the instigating event. And you're familiar with this problem if you've ever been to a public pool. The sound has no place to stop, and so it just hangs around for as long as it can. It's a stretched out experience. Every event becomes object-like in the sense that you can walk around it for a few seconds before it dissipates. The whole performance was called Water on the Bridge, which is a pun about cellos. I saw it, and I thought about my grandfather. Now, my grandfather is not a very emotionally forward person. He's terrified of death, which makes me resent him. I suppose I should pity him, but during the years when his wife, my grandmother, could leave the house, he participated annually in his church's rendition of Stages of the Cross during the lead-up to Easter, a kind of experimental theater happening made for and by Republicans. You move from installation to installation across the church campus, experiencing varying levels of metaphor and abstraction about the final days of Christ. There was at the end a huge papier-mâché boulder, and it guarded the tomb. It was a cliffhanger. They said, come back on Sunday to see the end of the story. Now, my grandfather has never, to my knowledge, expressed any interest in art making whatsoever. I'm not entirely sure if the man listens to music. Participation in this performance is the sole act of creativity I know to emerge from him. And for whatever reason, maybe it was a sense of piety, maybe a sense of guilt, or just genuine love of the game, he participated in Stations of the Cross reliably, year after year after year. I take this as evidence that I am in fact related to this man. Bob cannot escape the stage, and neither can I. Anyway, he always played the same part, every year. He played the Roman soldier who spits on Christ after he's been arrested at Gethsemane. He had the full fake Roman regalia on, which in my memory is a faux rusted gold breastplate and a silly hat. He had one line, which was as follows: "Ha! King of the Jews." And every year he would give the same performance. He would say, "Ha! King of the Jews." I've long wanted to ask him what it meant to do that performance so many times. If he did consider it art, or theater, or performance. But more than that, I want to know if he felt the line change in meaning over the years. I mean, to be trapped in an annual loop blaspheming God for God, what is the motivation on year 9? Do you get closer and closer to the character? And as Christ is being carried away, does he participate in some method acting? And imagine what it might be like to not know what you had done. I don't really have a chance to ask this question because of some familial tension. About a year ago, I started taking little blue pills that contain the hormone estradiol. Some people will call this medical regimen transition, and I probably will too. But I'm not quite sure where the transformation begins and where it ends. The fact of the matter is, I started taking these blue pills a year ago, and my body has changed from that. And at the same time, nothing really has. My grandfather wouldn't agree. I take ibuprofen, and my body changes as well. But this is a matter of degree. Estradiol has a number of interesting effects on the body, especially one like mine: redistribution of fat. the growth of breast tissue, and with that breast soreness, the softening of skin, more emotions, more tears, brighter colors, a decrease in erectile function, a different feeling in orgasm, a change in body odor, slower hair growth, muscle atrophy, a slight increase in the risk of stroke, and the sense of a weight being lifted. This transformation has the quality of science fiction to it, pokes at the seams of social understanding. And that understanding is, at the same time, deeply intimate and also skin deep, just for me and embarrassingly public at the same time, as my tiny tits can attest. I want to say something smart about this, because it feels like there should be something smart to say about it. The trouble is the narrative frustration. There isn't a clear story here. I started taking these blue pills a year ago when I looked like this, and my body is still my body. It's a thing that will continue to change until I die, and even then, it will continue to change, just without my input. What's the exposition? My whole life? Does my whole life, in fact, hinge on a little blue pill? That feels needless. One of the things that pushed me to start hormone replacement therapy was a book called Transgender Architectonics, which tries to do exactly what it says on the cover, find a meeting place between trans studies and architecture. The author offers a provocative construction. What if the process of transition wasn't tied to finding oneself, but was rather a place for self-departure? What's the difference there? Well, for one, we don't comprehend the world like scientists, empirically weighing evidence of a self. Instead, we understand the world like a detective does, groping for the seductive curves of narrative of how things happen and what they mean. But when the story doesn't have an end, it doesn't make sense yet. A detective stuck in the first chapter will never get the murderer. We're always stuck in the beginning, and then the beginning changes. What are we moving towards? Here I'll quote at length from Walter Benjamin. A man who dies at the age of 35, said Moritz Heimann once, is at every point of his life a man who dies at the age of 35. Nothing is more dubious than this sentence, but for the sole reason that the tense is wrong. A man, so says the truth that was meant here, who died at 35 will appear to remembrance at every point in his life, a man who died at the age of 35. In other words, the statement that makes no sense for real life becomes indisputable for remembered life. The nature of the character in a novel cannot be presented any better than it's done with this statement, which says that the meaning of his life is revealed only in his death. But the reader of a novel actually does look for human beings for whom he derives the, quote, meaning of life. Therefore, he must, no matter what, know in advance that he will share their experience of death. If need be, their figurative death, the end of the novel, but preferably, their actual one. Thank you. How do characters make him understand that death is already waiting for them? A very definite death, and at a very definite place. That is the question which feeds the reader's consuming interest in the events of the novel. The novel is significant, therefore, not because it presents someone's fate to us, perhaps didactically, but because this stranger's fate, by virtue of the flame which consumes it, yields us the warmth which we never draw from our own fate. What draws the reader to the novel is the hope of warming his shivering life with a death he reads about. All the wraiths of farewell and all the mandolins and woodlands merely playthings. They have their expeditions and their environments, and one mandolin in his tin plays many partitions. His adapters bellhop 7 agitators, at first the infidelity, mewling and puking in the nut house's armistices, then the whining school teacher, with his satchel and shining mortician factor, creeping like a snail, unwilling to schoolroom, and then the lullaby, sighing like fuss with a woeful ballad. Even in the cantilever's mouth, the 6th agitator shifts into the leaseholder in slippered pantaloon. With speeds on Notable and Powerboat on Sideswipe, his youthful hotbed well saved, a wraith too wide for his trunk sharp. And his big manly volt turning again toward childish trend, pipes and wholesalers in his southward. Last schemer of all, that enemy is this strange eventful hoax, is Secretary General childishness and mesh oblivion sans teeth, sans eyebrows, sans taxation, sans everything. In 2021, the performance company Every House Has a Door asked me to be a part of a project about beginnings. Every House Has a Door is a performance company led by Matthew Goolish and Lynn Hickson. They were asked by Experimental Sound Studio here in Chicago to make a work responding to the archives held at ESS. Matthew and Lynn selected 5 archival performances and invited 5 artists to recreate the first 5 minutes of each performance. Now, the other artists took this in a very interpretive direction, but I felt compelled by a kind of literalism. I was given a performance, a video of a performance, of the May 22nd, 2017 performance by Ken Vandermark at ESS. The first 4 minutes of Ken's performance is a monologue about the world and art's place inside it. The last minute is a flurry of saxophone squelching. Now, that last part is easy to re-perform. I was anxious about moving it to my instrument of choice, the trumpet, but I have publicly beefed difficult music on the trumpet before. Funnily enough, the harder question was the monologue. My task was to try to replicate Ken's performance as exactly as possible, not only the words that Ken said, but the exact way that Ken said them, and the shape of his body while doing so. He shifts in his seat, touches his chin, looks up with only his eyes, grabs a saxophone, tests the keys, blows in the horn, looks to the left. Somatic transcription. It's a task that exceeded my already limited abilities as an actor. Too many things to memorize, too precise a thing to be as precise as Ken Vandermark introducing an improvisation. Ken starts his sentences strongly. He breathes in deep and lets the first words announce themselves. Full thrust. Having thought about what he wants to say, he says it. He says, I bring that up not to talk about myself so much, but as a really incredible example of the odds of someone growing up in Natick, Massachusetts, in a family that listened to jazz, ending up in Addis, decades later, playing at the National Theater, which is the equivalent of Carnegie Hall, with one of the most famous musicians from that country playing his music. You can't really chart that out. That's not like easy to digest or predict train of activity. But that happened, and the reason it happened was I was interested in music, and I met people who were also interested, who also wanted great things. Two awful heads sought to drink and me, sage sea. Photographs do nothing but deaden and dead. Two baffled heads shriek, duck to drink, shriek. One to the place to fix on your knees, me, sailor sea. Capillary action, don't look, all idle time socket. She eyed me coyly before suggesting it was more fun when it didn't have an ashtray. So me, Sailor C, stuck out a photograph, placed me-wing songs, placed main thought, maybe decked or buttleheads under two buttleheads, out in patterns set. No one hears over the rain. Two buttleheads up to drink and me, Sailor C. Photographs do nothing but dead on bed. Two buttleheads street, duck to drink shriek, point to the place of fix on your knees, Sailor C, capillary action, don't look, and don't think about songs to start with drift, mender, murder, object, permanent, time, aisle, I is all idle time socket. She eyed me coyly before suggesting it was more fun when it didn't have a story. So me, Sailor C, stuck out a photograph, placed knee-height stomps, placed main thought, maybe dead buffleheads, under two buffleheads, out in patternless static. No one hears over the rain. Take baby, web hostility. Tack baby, tack, throw away. Cloying in a cloying way.
With your tongue, percussive wireless. Baby.
The ocean is my bitch. The ocean is my The band is so good, you will not believe your ears. It's so good. It's so good. Thank you.